The deep hum of the station's reactor was different today. Do-hyun noticed it the moment he stepped into the engineering control room. After 15 years working with reactors, he could tell something was wrong just from the sound. He looked at the large display screens that covered the wall, showing the status of Research Station 7's power systems. "Good morning, Chief Do-hyun," said Jae-yun, his control room operator. She was new to the station, having arrived only 3 months ago. The night shift reported all systems normal. Do-hyun nodded, but kept studying the screens. The reactor's power output graph showed tiny changes that shouldn't be there. They were so small that the automatic systems hadn't noticed them yet. But they were there, like a quiet whisper warning of trouble. "Jae-yun, can you show me the cooling system readings for the past 6 hours?" he asked, setting down his cup of morning coffee. Jae-yun's fingers moved quickly across her control panel. New graphs appeared on the main screen. Do-hyun stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the numbers. "There," he said, pointing to a line that showed slightly higher temperatures in cooling rod section 4. "The temperature shouldn't change like that. Something's not right." Just then, a loud alarm filled the room. Red warning lights started flashing. The reactor's automatic safety system had finally noticed what Do-hyun had felt minutes ago. "Alert! Reactor cooling system malfunction detected. Radiation leak detected in Chamber 4. All personnel must evacuate immediately," the station's computer announced in its calm voice. Do-hyun watched as the alien engineering team's life signs appeared on another screen. The team of 6 aliens, led by Senior Engineer X, was already in the reactor chamber doing their morning checks. Their body readings showed rising panic as they rushed to follow emergency protocols. "Jae-yun, call Hee-jin in medical monitoring. Tell him to keep track of the alien team's vital signs," Do-hyun ordered as he grabbed his engineering kit. "And get me a radiation suit." "Chief, the alien team is reporting that the leak is getting worse," Jae-yun said, her voice steady despite the situation. "They say the cooling rod in Section 4 is misaligned. The radiation levels are already too high for their safety protocols." The station's computer updated its warning. "Alert! Radiation levels exceeding safe limits for Class 3 species. Chamber 4 containment protocols activated. Time until critical reactor failure, 3 hours." Do-hyun knew what that meant. The alien engineers, with their sensitive bodies, couldn't stay in that radiation. But if nobody fixed the cooling rod, the reactor would fail. That would mean no power for the station's life support systems. There were 50,000 people on Research Station 7, scientists, workers, and their families from 30 different species. "Status report on the alien engineering team," Do-hyun asked, checking the seals on his radiation suit. The suit was built for human use, much simpler than the complex protection the aliens needed. "They've evacuated to the safety chamber," Jae-yun replied. "Senior Engineer X is requesting to speak with you." A new screen lit up, showing X's face. Like all members of the Ven species, X had smooth blue skin and large, dark eyes that could see radiation waves. Right now, those eyes showed clear worry. "Chief Do-hyun, the situation is severe," X said. "Our instruments show the cooling rod has shifted 0.3 degrees from its proper position. The radiation leak will continue until it is realigned." But X paused, mandibles clicking in distress. "Even with our best protective suits, we cannot safely return to fix it. The radiation levels are too high for our species." "I understand," Do-hyun said. "Send me the exact measurements and your repair plans. I'm heading to Chamber 4 now." "But Chief," X's voice rose in pitch, "even for a human, the radiation levels are dangerous. Our safety protocols state that no repairs should be attempted until we can bring in special equipment. That will take at least 6 hours." Do-hyun was already walking toward the reactor chamber. "We don't have 6 hours, X. The reactor will go critical in 3. How many people would die if we lost life support?" "I understand your concern," X said carefully. But our protective suits are designed to our engineering standards. The gloves have 3 layers of radiation shielding. They make detailed work very difficult. Even if you could withstand the radiation, how would you handle the delicate adjustments needed? Do-hyun reached the entrance to Chamber 4. Through the thick safety glass, he could see the reactor's massive core. Somewhere in there, a tiny misalignment was threatening everyone on the station. Jae-yun, patch Ho-jin into this channel, Do-hyun said. A moment later, the medical officer's voice joined the conversation. I'm here, Chief. I'm monitoring your vital signs now, Ho-jin reported. The radiation in Chamber 4 is high, but it's within the emergency limits for human exposure. You'll have about 20 minutes before you reach dangerous levels. Do-hyun looked at the complex repair plans Ix had sent. The adjustments needed were incredibly small and precise. The alien engineer was right about one thing. Nobody could do that kind of detailed work wearing thick protective gloves. Ix, I've studied the reactor designs. I know exactly what needs to be done, Do-hyun said. But I'll need to modify the standard procedure. Modify? How? Ix asked. Do-hyun took a deep breath. What he was about to suggest would shock the alien engineers. I'll need to take off the gloves. There was complete silence on the communication channel. Then several voices started speaking at once. Impossible. That would be suicide. The radiation would burn your hands. Ho-jin, Do-hyun said calmly. What's your medical opinion? Can human skin handle this level of radiation for the time needed? Ho-jin was quiet for a moment, checking his readings. Yes, he finally said. Humans have natural radiation resistance much higher than most species. Your hands would receive a serious dose, but nothing permanently damaging. You'd need treatment afterward, but you could safely work without gloves for about 8 minutes. 8 minutes will be enough, Do-hyun said. He looked at the reactor again. Jae-yun, start the chamber entry sequence. Ix, I need you to guide me using the radiation imaging. Your eyes can see exactly where the misalignment is. This goes against every safety protocol we have, Ix said slowly. But we don't have another choice, do we? No, we don't, Do-hyun agreed. And X, thank you for trusting me. The heavy doors to Chamber 4 began to open. Do-hyun checked his suit one last time. The station's future depended on what would happen in the next few minutes. As he stepped into the chamber, he could hear Jae-yun starting the countdown. Chamber 4 entry complete. Radiation exposure timer starting now. Good luck, Chief. The massive reactor core hummed in front of him. And somewhere in its depths, a tiny problem threatened thousands of lives. Do-hyun walked forward, ready to show the galaxy why humans were called Deathworlders, and why sometimes that was exactly what was needed. The reactor chamber felt different from the inside. Do-hyun had studied its blueprints many times, but standing here now, he could truly appreciate its massive size. The cooling rods rose up like silver towers around him, disappearing into the shadows above. The damaged section was 30 meters ahead, glowing with a faint blue light that only Ix's species could properly see. Chief Do-hyun, Ix's voice came through the comm system. I can see the radiation patterns clearly. The misalignment is causing energy to leak from the connection point. It's worse than our instruments showed. Do-hyun walked carefully toward the problem area. His radiation suit felt heavy, but he had trained for emergency repairs like this. Well, maybe not exactly like this. His instructors had never suggested taking off his gloves. 7 minutes remaining in safe exposure window, Jae-yun announced from the control room. Her voice was professional, but Do-hyun could hear the worry in it. He reached the access panel for the cooling rod controls. Usually this would be a simple job. Just open the panel, adjust the rod's position by a fraction of a degree, and close it up again. But the panel's controls were tiny, designed for the delicate fingers of alien engineers. Even without gloves, it would be challenging. With the thick protective gloves of his suit, it would be impossible. Ix, Do-hyun said. I'm at the panel. Guide me through what you see." The alien engineer's large eyes were perfect for this task. They could see radiation like humans saw light, showing exactly where the problem was. The misalignment is at the upper connection point. The rod has shifted 0.3 degrees to the left. This is causing... Wait, what are you doing? Do-hyun had started removing his right glove. The protective seals hissed as they released. "Chief, stop," one of Ix's junior engineers shouted. "The radiation levels there are within human tolerance levels for short exposure." Hujin interrupted from medical monitoring. "His cellular structure can handle this. Chief, you have 6 minutes before you need to get that glove back on." The glove came off. Do-hyun's hand felt cold in the chamber's air. He flexed his fingers, enjoying the freedom of movement. Now he could feel the tiny control surfaces properly. Recording all of this for the safety investigation, another alien engineer announced, "This violation of protocol will need to be..." "Focus," Do-hyun said calmly. "Ix, guide me. What do you see?" There was a pause. Then Ix seemed to make a decision. "The radiation flow shows the exact point of misalignment. Move your hand up slowly. Stop. There. You're at the primary adjustment control." Do-hyun's fingers found the small ridges of the control surface. Without the gloves blocking his sense of touch, he could feel the subtle differences in texture that marked each adjustment point. The alien engineers watched in fascinated horror as his bare hand worked with the radioactive components. 5 minutes remaining, Jae-yun reported. "The leak is beginning to change pattern," Ix said, his voice showing surprise. "The adjustment is working. But how can you feel such small differences without protective equipment?" Do-hyun smiled, even though no one could see it through his helmet. "Human hands are more sensitive than you might think. We evolved to use tools. Our fingers can feel differences as small as a few micrometers." He continued working, guided by Ix's observations and his own sense of touch. The control surface moved slightly under his fingers. He could feel when it caught at certain points, telling him exactly how the mechanism worked. "Remarkable," Ix muttered. "The radiation patterns are stabilizing. But Chief, your hand is showing signs of exposure." "The skin is." "I know," Do-hyun said. His hand was starting to feel warm, then hot, like he had held it too close to a fire. But he could feel he was close to the correct alignment. Just a little more. 4 minutes until maximum safe exposure limit, Jae-yun announced. The next few minutes were intense. Do-hyun worked quickly but carefully, making tiny adjustments. Ix called out readings, describing how the radiation patterns changed with each movement. The other alien engineers had gone quiet. Watching something they had been taught was impossible. "There's something else," Do-hyun said suddenly. "The rod isn't just misaligned. There's a loose connection in the mounting bracket. I can feel it vibrating wrongly." "Impossible to detect that through protective equipment," Ix said. "Our maintenance schedules wouldn't have found it for another month. By then it would have failed completely," Do-hyun finished. The misalignment was just a warning sign. "Hold on." His fingers moved to the mounting bracket. This was the dangerous part. One wrong move and the whole rod could shift. But he could feel exactly where the problem was, something that would have been impossible with gloves. 3 minutes remaining, Jae-yun said. Her voice was tenser now. "Almost there," Do-hyun said. The mounting bracket had a subtle wobble. His fingers traced it to its source, a microfracture in one of the connection points. He pressed carefully, feeling how the metal responded. "The radiation pattern is changing dramatically," Ix reported. "The leak it's sealing itself." "How?" "The bracket is self-repairing," Do-hyun explained, his fingers still working. "It's made of smart metal. It just needed to be pushed back into the correct position so its repair systems could activate. Without direct contact, we would never have found the real problem." The metal under his fingers grew warm, then cool again. The vibration stopped. The bracket had repaired itself, and the cooling rod settled into its proper alignment with a soft click that Do-hyun felt more than heard. Radiation levels dropping, Jae-yun announced. Now at 40% of crisis levels, 30%, 20%. The pattern is perfect now, Ix said, wonder in his voice. Better than our standard alignment specifications. But your hand. Do-hyun looked at his right hand. The skin was red and felt like a bad sunburn, but he could still move his fingers normally. He quickly put the protective glove back on, sealing it properly. 2 minutes remaining in safe exposure window, Jae-yun said, relief clear in her voice. Chief, please exit the chamber. As Do-hyun walked back toward the chamber door, he heard the alien engineering team discussing rapidly among themselves. Their translator wasn't keeping up with their excitement, but he caught phrases like impossible and against all safety protocols and completely unprecedented. Jin, he called. How bad is it? Nothing permanent, the medical officer replied. You'll need radiation treatment for the hand, and you'll probably lose some skin over the next few days. But you'll heal completely. Though I expect the Safety Review Board will not be as healthy after they see this report. Do-hyun reached the safety chamber. The decontamination systems activated, spraying him with radiation-neutralizing chemicals. Through the thick windows, he could see Ix and his team staring at him with their large dark eyes. Chief Do-hyun, Ix said formally, you have violated 17 different safety protocols. You risked permanent injury. You ignored all standard procedures. The alien engineer paused. And you saved everyone on this station. I do not know whether to recommend you for punishment or commendation. How about we start with getting my hand treated, Do-hyun suggested. Then maybe we can talk about updating those safety protocols. Some of them might need adjusting for human capabilities. Yes, Ix agreed. It seems we have much to learn about. What did you call it? Tool user sensitivity. Perhaps humans have more to teach us than we realized. As the decontamination cycle finished, Do-hyun thought about how this would change things. The alien engineers had just learned something important about humans. Sometimes, what looked like reckless behavior was actually careful calculation. And sometimes, the safest solution wasn't the one wrapped in the most protective layers. Jae-yun, he called. Please tell Station Director Yume that the crisis is over. And maybe warn her that the Safety Board is going to have some interesting footage to review. Already done, Chief, Jae-yun replied. Though I think explaining how you fixed a radiation leak with your bare hands is going to be an interesting conversation. Do-hyun smiled as he walked toward the medical bay. Interesting conversations were what happened when different species worked together. And sometimes, those conversations started with breaking all the rules for exactly the right reasons. The medical bay was quiet except for the soft hum of the regeneration unit working on Do-hyun's hand. Jin moved around the room, checking readings and adjusting settings while Do-hyun sat patiently. The skin on his right hand was red and tender, but the advanced medical equipment was already helping it heal. The radiation damage is superficial, Jin said, studying the medical screens. Your natural radiation resistance combined with the limited exposure time prevented any serious harm. You should have full function back in 3 days. Do-hyun nodded, watching the blue healing light move over his hand. How are the radiation exposure records looking? Interesting, actually. Jin pulled up a detailed report on the main screen. Your exposure was high by normal safety standards, but well within human emergency limits. What's fascinating is how precisely you managed your time. You used exactly as much exposure as you needed, no more. The medical bay door opened, and Station Safety Director Yumai walked in. Her expression was a mixture of concern and professional interest. She carried a data tablet that probably contained all the safety violation reports from the incident. Chief Engineer Do-hyun, she said formally. How is your hand? Healing well, Director, Do-hyun replied. I assume you've reviewed the incident recordings. Yumai pulled up a chair and sat down. Yes, and that's why I'm here. The alien engineering team has submitted their reports, But I need to understand your reasoning. You deliberately removed safety equipment in a high radiation environment. That decision requires extensive documentation. I understand, Du Hyun said. Would you like me to explain my risk assessment? Please do. Yumai activated her tablet's recording function. This will be part of the official investigation. Do Hyun sat up straighter, organizing his thoughts. The situation presented two main risks. First, the immediate radiation exposure from working without gloves. Second, the risk of reactor failure if the repairs weren't completed in time. I had to balance these against each other. And you determined that direct exposure was the lesser risk? Yumai asked. Yes. He-jin, could you show the director the radiation tolerance comparisons? He-jin brought up new data on the screen. This shows the radiation resistance levels of different species, he explained. Humans evolved on a planet with higher background radiation than most spacefaring species. Our cells have natural repair mechanisms that can handle short-term exposure. Yumai studied the numbers carefully. These figures are quite remarkable. But they don't explain why you couldn't use the standard protective equipment. That's where the practical engineering comes in, Du Hyun said. Director, have you ever tried to adjust a micro-alignment control while wearing 3 layers of radiation-proof gloves? I haven't, Yumai admitted. It's nearly impossible. The gloves are designed for alien physiologies. They're excellent at blocking radiation, but they reduce tactile sensitivity to almost nothing. It would be like trying to thread a needle while wearing thick winter gloves. The door opened again, and Senior Engineer Ix entered, followed by 2 junior engineers. They had changed out of their protective suits, but still looked concerned. Director Yume, Ix said, we would like to add our observations to this discussion. Please do. Yume gestured for them to join the conversation. Ix's large eyes focused on Du Hyun's injured hand before he spoke. What the human engineer did was completely against our safety protocols. It violated every principle of radiation protection we teach, and it was also the only solution that could have worked in time. One of the junior engineers stepped forward, activating a holographic display. We have analyzed the reactor data. The cooling rod misalignment was caused by a subtle materials failure that our standard inspections couldn't detect. Without direct tactile contact, we would never have found the true problem. The smart metal repair systems require precise positioning to activate, the other junior engineer added. Our protective equipment makes such precise work impossible. We would have needed to shut down the reactor entirely and wait for specialized tools. Yume made notes on her tablet. And the reactor shutdown option wasn't viable. No, Du Hyun said firmly. A full shutdown would have taken too long. Life support systems would have failed before we could restore power. We had 50,000 people depending on that reactor. 50,317 people, Ix corrected, including 2,400 juveniles in the education sectors. The humans' actions, while unorthodox, saved them all. He-jin spoke up from his medical station. Director, I've completed the cellular damage analysis. Chief Do Hyun's exposure was significant but controlled. He maintained awareness of his exposure limits and worked efficiently within them. This wasn't reckless behavior. It was calculated risk management. Yumai looked thoughtful. The safety board will still have concerns. This sets a precedent that could be dangerous if misapplied. Then perhaps we should focus on appropriate application, Du Hyun suggested. Humans have different capabilities than other species. Our safety protocols should reflect that. Agreed, Ix said, surprising everyone. In fact, my team has already begun drafting modified procedures that account for human physiological advantages. We believe there are many situations where human capabilities could improve our emergency response options. The junior engineers nodded enthusiastically. One of them brought up another holographic display, showing proposed new safety guidelines. We've analyzed the incident data. The human's tactile sensitivity allowed detection of problems our instruments missed. This suggests potential improvements in our maintenance procedures. Yumai studied the proposed changes. This is quite thorough. You've already put considerable thought into this. The incident showed us something important, Ix said. Our safety protocols were designed to protect all species equally. But treating all species the same isn't always the safest approach. Humans have natural abilities that we should utilize, not restrict. Like how we use your species' radiation vision for diagnostic work, Du Hyun added. Different species, different strengths. The regeneration unit finished its work on Du Hyun's hand. The skin was still pink, but no longer painful. Hejin ran a final scan and nodded in satisfaction. A perfect example, Yumai said, watching Do Hyun flex his healed fingers. Your species can recover from radiation exposure that would permanently harm others. That's a valuable emergency capability. As long as it's used responsibly, Du Hyun agreed. We're not suggesting humans should ignore safety protocols, but we should have protocols that match our abilities. I believe I have enough information for my report, Yumai said, standing. Chief Do Hyun, you'll receive an official reprimand for violating current safety protocols. You'll also receive a commendation for exceptional service in an emergency situation. She smiled slightly. The safety board may find that combination interesting to process. After Yumai left, Ix approached Do Hyun. There is something we haven't mentioned yet, the alien engineer said. My species can see radiation, but we never truly understood how it feels. Watching you work with it directly, it changed our perspective. Perhaps humans can teach us more than just emergency procedures. Do Hyun looked at his healed hand, then at the alien engineers with their specialized vision, and finally at Hejin with his medical expertise. Each species had its own way of understanding the universe. Today, those different understandings had worked together to save lives. That's what space exploration is really about, isn't it? He said, not just learning about new technologies, but learning from each other, even if sometimes that means doing things that seem impossible. The junior engineers were already discussing more potential applications of human abilities. Hejin was explaining cellular repair mechanisms to a fascinated Ix, and somewhere in the station's computer, new safety protocols were being written. Protocols that recognized that sometimes the safest hands for the job were bare human ones. 1 week after the reactor incident, Research Station 7 had returned to its normal routine. The reactor hummed with its usual steady sound, and the cooling systems worked perfectly. But things had changed in subtle ways. The alien engineers now looked at their human colleagues differently, with a mixture of respect and curiosity that hadn't been there before. Do Hyun sat in the main conference room, reviewing maintenance reports on his data tablet. His right hand showed no signs of the radiation exposure it had endured. The station's advanced medical technology had healed it completely, just as Hejin had predicted. Chief Engineer Jae-yun called from the doorway. The Galactic Engineering Safety Board representatives have arrived. Director Yumai requests your presence in Meeting Chamber 1. Do Hyun nodded and stood up. He had been expecting this. News of his unorthodox repair method had spread quickly through the Commonwealth's engineering community. Some called it brilliant. Others called it reckless. Now the safety board would make their official judgment. The meeting chamber was already full when he arrived. 3 safety board representatives sat at the main table. They were all from different species, chosen to provide balanced perspectives. Director Yumai sat opposite them, with senior engineer Ix beside her. Hejin was there too, ready to present the medical data. Chief Engineer Do Hyun, the Central Board representative, said. Their translator rendered their complex name as Kai. Please be seated. We have reviewed the incident reports thoroughly, but we have additional questions. Do Hyun took his place at the table. I'm ready to answer them. Kai activated a holographic display showing the reactor chamber during the crisis. Our first concern is precedent. Your actions, while successful, could encourage dangerous behavior in others. How do you respond to this? With respect, Do Hyun replied. I believe we should focus on understanding why the action was successful, not just that it broke protocol. My species has natural capabilities that current safety standards don't account for. The second board representative, who appeared to be from a crystalline species, spoke next. Please explain your decision-making process during the crisis. Do-hyun gestured to Hui-jin, who brought up the medical data. First, I confirmed that human radiation tolerance would allow the repair time needed. Second, I verified that the repair required fine tactile control that wasn't possible with standard safety equipment. Third, I ensured constant monitoring of both my exposure levels and the repair progress. The medical data supports this, Hui-jin added. The chief's exposure was carefully managed. He used only 82% of his safe exposure window. The third board representative, who had 4 arms and green scales, studied the data. Your species' radiation resistance is remarkable, but surely there were other options, remote manipulation tools, perhaps. X spoke up then. We analyzed all alternatives. Remote tools lacked the sensitivity needed for micro-adjustments. More importantly, they would not have detected the underlying material's failure that caused the problem. This is a crucial point, Yumai said. The human ability to directly sense mechanical problems proved vital. Our standard diagnostic equipment missed what human touch detected immediately. Kay considered this. We have reviewed similar cases where emergency procedures were modified for species-specific capabilities. The aquatic engineers of Sector 7, for example, are authorized to work without atmospheric protection in flooded sections. Exactly, Do-hyun said. Different species have different strengths. Good safety protocols should use those strengths, not ignore them. The crystalline representative's surface flickered with changing colors, their species' way of showing deep thought. The medical data is convincing. Human cellular repair mechanisms handle radiation exposure very differently from most species. Which raises another question, the scaled representative said. Should we develop separate safety standards for humans in engineering roles? I believe we should, Yumai replied. In fact, my station has already begun developing new protocols that account for human capabilities. Senior Engineer X has been leading this effort. X activated another holographic display, showing the new protocols. We've identified several emergency scenarios where human abilities could be crucial. These protocols maintain safety while allowing humans to use their natural advantages. The board representative studied the proposed protocols carefully. He spoke again. These are well designed. They include clear criteria for when human-specific procedures can be used, required monitoring systems, and exposure limits based on actual human physiology. We've also added training requirements, X said. All engineering team members, regardless of species, will learn about the different capabilities of their colleagues. This promotes better understanding and safer emergency response. The crystalline representative's colors shifted to what their translator indicated was approval. This approach could improve safety across the Commonwealth. Each species' natural abilities could be properly utilized instead of restricted by one-size-fits-all protocols. There's more, Hui-jin added. The medical data from this incident has helped us better understand human radiation resistance. We can now predict exposure tolerance more accurately, which makes emergency procedures safer. The scaled representative nodded all 4 arms. The educational value alone is significant. This incident has provided valuable data about human capabilities under extreme conditions. Ki turned to Do-hyun. Chief Engineer, what would you say to those who might see your actions as reckless? Do-hyun thought carefully before answering. I would say that true safety comes from understanding and using our capabilities wisely, not from treating all species as if they were the same. Humans evolved on a high radiation world. We're built to handle conditions that would harm other species. Ignoring that fact doesn't make anyone safer. Well said, Yumai agreed. The real safety violation would have been letting 50,000 people die because we were afraid to use the right tool for the job. The board representatives conferred privately for several minutes, their translators turned off. Finally, Key addressed the room again. We have reached a decision. The safety board recognizes that this incident, while unorthodox, has provided valuable insights into species-specific emergency procedures. We approve the development of human-specific safety protocols for engineering operations. The crystalline representative added, furthermore, we recommend that Research Station 7's new protocols be used as a model for other Commonwealth facilities. This incident demonstrates the value of understanding and properly utilizing the natural capabilities of all species. However, the scaled representative cautioned, we must emphasize the importance of proper training and monitoring. These new protocols will require careful implementation to prevent misuse. Do-hyun nodded in agreement. Understanding our differences makes us stronger, but we need to be smart about how we use those differences. After the meeting ended, Ix approached Do-hyun. The board's decision will change how we approach engineering safety throughout the Commonwealth. Your actions may have done more than save our station. They may have started a fundamental shift in how different species work together. Do-hyun looked at his fully healed hand. Sometimes the best way to keep people safe is to admit that we're not all the same. Different species, different strengths, different solutions. Indeed, Yumai said, joining them. And speaking of different solutions, I believe you have some new safety protocols to help write. After all, who better to help design human-specific procedures than the human who proved they were needed? As they left the meeting chamber, Do-hyun thought about how one crisis had led to so much change. Sometimes it took an emergency to show people new possibilities, and sometimes the best way to follow the rules was to help write new ones that made more sense. 3 months after the reactor incident, Research Station 7 had undergone significant changes. The engineering department now had a dedicated species capability integration section, where engineers from different species worked together to develop new safety procedures. The station had become a model for the entire Commonwealth in how to use the unique abilities of each species effectively. Do-hyun stood in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Behind him, he could hear the excited voices of a tour group, engineering students from various species who had come to learn about the station's new approach to safety and emergency responses. And this is where our human chief engineer made the famous bare-handed reactor repair. Ix was saying to the students, notice the new monitoring systems we've installed. They're specifically calibrated for different species' natural abilities. One of the students, a young engineer from a high-gravity world, raised their hand. Is it true that humans can feel mechanical problems that our best sensors can't detect? Yes, it is, Do-hyun said, turning to face the group. Just as your species can work in gravity conditions that would crush most others, and just as Ix's people can see radiation patterns directly, we all have different gifts. The students gathered around him eagerly. Do-hyun noticed how different they all looked. Some with scales, some with fur, some with crystalline bodies, and some with forms that defied easy description. Yet they were all united by their interest in engineering. Chief Do-hyun called Jae-hyun from the doorway. The new emergency response simulations are ready for testing. Hae-jin has the medical monitoring systems prepared. Perfect timing, Do-hyun said to the students. Would you like to see how we train for species-specific emergency responses? The training center had been completely redesigned. Where once there had been standard simulation pods, now there were specialized stations for different species. Each station was equipped with monitors that could track the unique vital signs and stress indicators of its user. Hae-jin stood at the main control station, adjusting settings. Today's scenario is a coordinated emergency response. We'll demonstrate how different species work together, each using their natural strengths. The students watched as a team of engineers, human, Ven, crystalline, and others, took their positions. The simulation began, presenting them with a complex emergency situation involving multiple system failures. Watch how each species approaches the problem differently, Ix explained to the students. The Ven engineer uses radiation vision to locate problems. The crystalline engineer can safely handle extreme temperatures. The human engineer uses touch sensitivity to detect mechanical issues. Together, they're more effective than any single species could be. Do-hyun monitored the simulation from the control room with Yumai. The new protocols are working well, he observed. Response times have improved by 40% since we implemented species-specific procedures. The Commonwealth Safety Board is very impressed, Yumai replied. They're recommending our training program be adopted across all major stations. Your reactor repair incident changed more than just our station's procedures. The simulation reached its climax. The engineering team worked seamlessly together, each member handling the tasks best suited to their natural abilities. When the scenario ended successfully, the students broke into appreciative sounds, some clapping, some clicking, some glowing with approval. Questions? Do-hyun asked the group. A crystalline student spoke first. How do you manage risk assessment with such different physiological capabilities? Good question, Do-hyun said. He-jin, could you show them the comparative safety matrices? He-jin brought up a detailed holographic display. We've developed a system that accounts for each species' natural resistances and vulnerabilities. For example, what's dangerous radiation for one species might be harmless to another. What's crushing pressure for some is normal gravity for others. The key, Ix added, is understanding that safety doesn't mean treating everyone the same. It means helping each species work in the way that's safest for them. A Venn student raised their hand next. But what about emergency situations where you don't have time to check all the safety protocols? That's why we train together, Do-hyun explained. Every engineer on this station knows their colleagues' capabilities. In an emergency, we don't waste time checking if someone can handle a situation. We already know who's best suited for each task. Yumai stepped forward. Let me show you something interesting. She activated another display, showing station efficiency metrics. Since implementing our new species integration protocols, we've had a 60% reduction in emergency response time, a 45% decrease in equipment failures, and 0 serious injuries. The numbers are impressive, He-jin agreed. But what's more impressive is how this has changed the way different species work together. We're not just tolerating our differences anymore, we're actively using them to make everything work better. One of the high-gravity world students looked thoughtful. In our engineering academy, they taught us that standardization was the key to safety. But this seems to suggest that understanding and using our differences is more important. Exactly, Do-hyun said. Think about it this way. If you needed to lift a heavy object, would you ask a low-gravity species to do it? If you needed to see radiation patterns, would you rely on species that can't see them? True efficiency comes from using the right capabilities for each task. The training session continued, with each student getting a chance to participate in simplified simulations. Do-hyun watched as they learned to work together, each contributing their unique abilities to solve problems. Later that day, after the students had left, Do-hyun sat in his office reviewing the training data. Jae-hyun brought him a report from the Commonwealth Engineering Council. They've officially designated Research Station 7 as the Commonwealth's primary training center for species integration engineering, she said. We'll be getting more students, and they want you to help develop the standard curriculum. Do-hyun smiled. From safety violation to training standard. That's quite a journey. It makes sense, Ix said, entering the office. Your reactor repair showed us something important. We had been so focused on making everyone follow the same procedures that we forgot why those procedures existed in the first place, to keep people safe and get the job done right. And sometimes, He-jin added, joining them, the safest way to handle a situation is to let people use their natural abilities, instead of forcing them to work around unnecessary restrictions. Yumai appeared in the doorway. The next group of engineering students arrives next week. They're calling it the Deathworlder Integration Program, though I think we need a better name. Not everyone understands that Deathworlder can be a compliment. Do-hyun looked at his right hand, remembering the reactor repair that had started all this. There wasn't even a scar to show what had happened. But the real changes weren't physical. They were in how people thought about working together. Maybe we should call it the Natural Capabilities Program, he suggested. After all, that's what it's really about. Understanding that every species has natural gifts, and the best engineering comes from using all of those gifts together. As his colleagues nodded in agreement, Do-hyun thought about how far they'd come. A single crisis had shown them a better way to work together. Now, engineers throughout the Commonwealth would learn that lesson too. Different species, different strengths, different solutions, but all working together to make the galaxy a better place. The reactor hummed steadily in the background, its sound a reminder of both crisis and triumph. And somewhere in the station, new engineers were learning that sometimes the best way to handle a problem was to trust in each other's natural abilities, even if that meant doing things that seemed impossible to others.